Right, let's make good of item 15. Oh, we've got to extend our time.
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
And it's just after 3:30. We'll extend it to 4:30, max.
I'll second that.
And when
Thank
I
you,
say
Councillor
happy to move, I
Simpson.
mean the extension of time,
Yep,
Madam
no,
Chair.
that's good. Right, done. Oh, sorry, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, Glengarry Road.
Yes, good afternoon. This is just to report the outcome of the public consultation on lifting the reserve revocation on Glengarry Road, and to provide the objection that was submitted together with the response from the Parks Policy team.
Sorry,
Sorry,
I've made a terrible and monumental mistake. I
Oh,
I was just a bit deflected by the extension of time and the excitement of getting the smoke-free policy. Poor Aaron sitting there thinking, oh my God, I've lasted for 17 hours and now they've moved right past me. Sorry, Glengarry people. Aaron, we will deal with TRI now. Don't lose hope.
I'm happy to move, Madam Chair, to get this on the table.
Okay, right. As she has. Just to move, is there a seconder? Seconded by Greg, thank you. Mason Neal, thank you.
What's this in?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll hand over to Mr Olsen to make the presentation. Just before doing that, I would acknowledge that I was here for the community and public input this morning, and those issues we've taken on board in the context of the management of TRI, the reserve land, the regional park land, and the potential future land in the south of TRI Point. And I will also follow up with Mr Smallburn in terms of the regulatory issues. So.
Do you have a question, Madam Chair, just quickly?
Yeah.
Just because that's been moved and seconded and that wasn't in my agenda, that addition, and it was scrolled down so I couldn't see the red addition. Is that your addition, Madam Chair?
Sorry, can we just
That
have
a councillor, was that a chair's addition?
No,
or?
it's not.
So I just want to make sure that's actually doable before because I've moved it under false pretences,
I
Madam
see.
Chair.
No, I just, sorry, I didn't notice that. It wasn't visible.
That was
And for this
my
agreement to be
recommendation then,
submitted.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, but I mean, can't just go
Yeah, we
in
just
there
need to have a quick
unless the
look.
chairs agree.
Yeah. Yeah. And for this agreement to be submitted.
isn't it?
Yeah.
For implementation.
Just want to make sure that's
Yeah.
is possible and practical, Madam
Yeah.
Chair.
No, I think staff are fine with that. Is that's what the expectation was, Maze? No, all good.
Madam Chair, we're very happy to report
Great.
back on
Yep.
that.
Thank you.
Lovely, good catch.
Sorry.
Okay, so should we just take a quick highlight, trot through the presentation? Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Chair. We're talking about doing a variation to the Regional Park Management Plan to incorporate the new regional park land at TRI. In the picture there in the centre is the existing land the council already manages and controls at TRI Point, which is made up of 50 hectares of regional parkland held under the Local Government Act, and surrounding that another 28 hectares of local parkland that was transferred to regional park management in 2013, and that land will also have to be brought into the new management plan. The additional lands that we're looking at are to the north and south of TRI Point, which are a result of the private developments that have occurred or are about to occur there. Because this land is held under both the Local Government Act and the Reserves Act, we'll be using the Reserves Act process, which is a two-phased consultation process by which we notify the intention to prepare the plan, we call for public submissions, we take note of those submissions in the preparation of a draft plan, and then we notify the draft plan for further submissions. Just to give you some context, the land that we're looking at extends from the Mangawhai Wildlife Refuge in the north, which is actually which is DOC-controlled wildlife refuge, which is just outside the regional boundary, down the coastline to TRI Point, and then the land further south, and I'll explain that a little bit further in a moment. But in that context, we also have the Tamarata Lake system, and while they're not a formal part of this management plan variation, we will need to consider the future linkages through to that and the future use of those parklands in relationship to the regional parkland. Now, the point that was raised earlier this morning about public access, at the moment the public access is along TRI Point Road, which is a public road to TRI Point where the major public facilities are, the major public access point, car parks and so on, toilets located. But in the northern forest there's the Pacific Road, which is currently a Crown forestry easement, and then to the south there is a forestry road, which is again a forestry easement. We'll need to be assured that we retain the public access across those easements. So I've already instigated some legal advice on that, and we're having talks with Auckland Transport over the possibility or the desirability of those becoming public roads at some future date. So the lands we're talking about are in the northern area is the green area, which has been transferred to the council as regional parkland and is subject to the Reserves Act. And one of the issues that we'll have to look at as part of the public consultation is what is the appropriate classification for that land under the Reserves Act. To the south is land that is identified as potential public land that will come across to us in due course as the development occurs in that southern forest. The southern forest, of course, was subject to treaty settlement arrangements with Ngāti Manuhiri, and the northern forest was part of treaty settlement arrangements with Te Uria Hau. Both parties we have had held hui with and have had some site visits with them to discuss the potential uses they would like to see occur on the public land. So that's just another shot of the land that we're talking about, with the Tamarata Lakes in the background. This is looking south from the Mangawhai Wildlife Refuge. The land that is coming across to us is from the coastline back to that area that's been cleared. It's about a 200-metre wide swathe of land that extends right down that coastline. We will end up with something like 14 kilometres of coastline in public ownership and something over 500 hectares of land for public use. That's another shot looking from the existing parkland north. As was raised earlier this morning, the sensitivities of this land, both in terms of the coastal dune systems, but more importantly to the threatened wildlife, the fairy terns and New Zealand dotterel that occur in this area, and the need to work with the local communities that are the Fairy Tern Trust and the other local trusts that are working in preserving those important taonga. So one of the big issues that we're dealing with, of course, is how we balance the recreational use with those conservation outcomes. And that's looking south from the existing regional park land across the land that Ngāti Manuhiri currently manage. That part of that will come across to us as regional parkland, to Parkeri in the south, and of course the Goat Island Marine Reserve at the far end of Parkeri Beach. And just another shot of the same area, just to give you an idea of how magnificent this land is, or this location is, and the potentials for recreational use. So the issues that we need to work through with the community relate to the future classification under the Reserves Act, the naming of the parkland, and we're working with both iwi on that. Both iwi have undertaken to prepare cultural values assessments for us to help us work through some of those issues. The relationships with the lake, the local reserves, and more importantly, the esplanade strips that DOC currently manage that run right along that coastline and up some of the river edges. We need to look at how we're going to integrate the management of the reserve, the regional park reserves, with the DOC managed areas, and we've already instigated discussions with them on that. The need to look at the balance of recreation and conservation. This is on the location of the Te Araroa National Walkway, so we need to integrate that into the way we lay out the park. And of course there have been a number of traditional uses along that coastline: surfing, there's been horse riding, mountain biking, camping, and dogs allowed into this area, which creates a bit of an issue for us in terms of how we manage the wildlife in relationship to those range of uses. And traditionally vehicles have been able to access the beach, so we need to look at whether that should persist over time. So those are the sorts of issues that we want to raise and work through with the community. We'll report back early in the new year to this committee on the outcomes of those discussions and the proposals for the draft document before we publish that, probably early March. Thank you.
I would just say, Madam Chair, I think the visitation to this area has been markedly increased, or has markedly increased in the last few years. So we now have, we only measure at one point, and that's the Te Arai Point location. So 88,000 visitors visit that location. There is, as Neil has said, public access to Pacific Road in the north and the road known as Forestry in the south. So in context, the visitation here is quite significant, and probably if you had to look at a national scale, it's around not dissimilar to Abel Tasman National Park or some of the other parks in the northern part of the region that have these stunning landscapes and high recreational and natural values. I think I'd also acknowledge that it is really important in terms of the community use in this location. It has been typically had quite high levels of access with the forestry development, and this is a change to some development, but more importantly the retention of public open space in perpetuity. So that's why we have a recommendation for you to protect this land in perpetuity from sale, Madam Chair, particularly given the gift of the land in the north through vesting and the most and likely vesting and gift of the land in the south, totalling just on 400 hectares. Thanks.
Thank you, Mace. It is indeed one of the most beautiful places on earth, actually. It's stunning. Councillor Walker.
Sure. First of all, I just want to make a comment on key issues. I'd suggest there are some additional key issues. In no particular order, the wilderness quality of the area. That word wilderness is absolutely crucial. It's arguably the last area in the Auckland region that has something resembling those qualities that many Aucklanders would accept. The other issue that's not up there is the threatened species, particularly the New Zealand fairy tern, dotterel and other species. So that should be a key issue. The third issue is the visual qualities of the area and the current despoilation of that through dwellings that are going to be seen visibly from the land and from the sea that threaten the very character of the wilderness. The other issue is the issue that goes to water, and especially the current degradation of that issue around the damming of that stream, the issues around the take of water for a golf course that requires large quantities of water, and the conflict between that and the natural environment, of which water is a taonga and is precious. And the last one being the plundering of sand in the area that has got significant issues into the future around sea level rise and coastal erosion. So they are key issues that I would add to that mix, Madam Chair, that should be uppermost in our mind. I've got a question, and that is, how soon can we dismantle the dam that I regard as illegal, that is threatening the fairy terns and impacting on fish passage, which is important not just to the fish that are a taonga, but also to the New Zealand fairy tern and other species, and I regard that as immediate. So how soon are we going to dismantle it, or does the community have to dismantle it themselves?
I think, Madam Chair, if I deal with those issues. So wilderness, yes, it's certainly in the outstanding natural landscape zone for the unitary plan. So very important in terms of its wild and scenic characteristics. Threatened species, certainly that's implicit in that balance between conservation and recreation. And together with the Department of Conservation, it's certainly an important area of how we manage and protect those threatened species in terms of the planning for this parkland, but also in the future management of visitors to the parkland. Visual amenity and the regulatory issues that Councillor Walker talks about matters for the regulatory part of the organisation, and I think earlier on there was in public input, Madam Chair, Councillor Sayles was going to lead that, but certainly I will be involved in assisting Mr Smallburn in terms of the relationship with the parkland and those issues.
How about dismantling the dam?
Well, again, I think it's a matter for the regulatory department.
They've dropped the ball.
Yeah. Yep, so the answer quite clearly that's been given 3 times now is, together with a bit of council strong-arming, the regulatory side of things will attend to the dam issue, Councillor Walker. So you work with Councillor Sayers on that. Actually, Councillor Sayers, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've already popped an email off to Mr Smallburn, copying you in, Mr Mace and others, and Mr Kimpton, to follow through on your suggestion, Madam Chair, so thank you for that. If I could just refer us to one of the appendix slides, Mr Olsen, appendix attachment C of the South Park, South Reserve, that one there. Just down the bottom there, there's a kind of little red tail there that says proposed private road access, right? And I think you alluded to this a little bit earlier in your introduction, but I've spotted it exactly on the map. Now, I just need some clarification here, because that's a paper road, as I understand it, owned by Auckland Transport, for use by the public. And it's running right smack through that. I know that farmer, and it's a dairy farm, so it's going to run right, if we develop a road there, it's going to run right through his land. So just curious what engagement we've perhaps had with that landowner and the dairy farmer who's leasing the land for his cattle. But more importantly, for that to become a private road, so that's it's at the moment it's in public ownership, it's a paper road. If it became a private road for exclusive use across there, then we're going across private land, the private road. We're going across private land which is currently a public access, and it goes across a stream from memory there, which could involve docks, so it's going to go across a stream, is that correct? Yeah. And then you've got the reserve, so it's into public reserve. So I'm just very curious of how that can move from public access into private access. And if somebody's able to purchase that, who's going to be offered, is that landowner be going to be spoken to with equal terms? So if you could just clarify, I'm very confused around how that happens and why that might be happening. So if you could clarify that for me, please.
This proposal is part of the precinct plan that was discussed and introduced into the unitary plan. I wasn't party to those discussions, so I don't know what transpired there, but my understanding was that that is a paper road, it is public, and it will remain public. So I am surprised that there's any suggestion that it would become private.
Yeah, because it just links from one.
We'll note that, Madam Chair, to take up with Regulatory and also Auckland Transport if necessary.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moses. I was just going to ask for some guidance on the next step here, just to get some further clarification.
And definitely, we will be notifying all the adjoining landowners, so they'll have the opportunity to make their opinions known to us during this process. So,
thank you very much. And as Madam Chair did, I just want to acknowledge Aaron for staying here all day. I know his colleagues have to go eventually, but thanks for staying the duration. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, did you want to use your speaking turn at the, because you can close the debate. I'll go to Councillor Member Wilcox and then go to you.
Oh, me?
You.
Thank you. Te arai. Okay. So I think my first question refers to the Māori impact statement there. I think it's very clear that this land has been gifted, even if it was with a bit of coercion, to council from a treaty settlement. So what's happened is that I'm just trying to understand in your impact statement, this part there, that mana whenua will name this. Wouldn't it be Te Uriohau and Manuhiri would name their places respectively?
that's a possibility. We haven't started that discussion with them, apart from alerting them to the issue that it will need to be addressed. But it will depend on what they come back with in terms of suggestions and how we can accommodate those. I mean, it would be possible to name different parts of the park. Under the Regional Park Management Plan, we have a management regime that allows special management zones for particular areas, and it would be possible to name those special management zones with different names. There will be a need to look at the overall name for the collection of parkland there, just so it's easy reference to people. But that's up for debate, really, up for discussion with mana whenua.
Yeah, I was under the impression that the giver would actually have some kind of rights over the name of this park, seeing as they're giving it. And the second part is, up in one of the slides there was vehicles on beaches, etc. So I thought the purpose of all this drama has been the protection of the ferry turns. So I'm kind of finding it a little bit hard to understand why we would be saying, oh yeah, drive your car up the beach where the ferry turns are. Just kind of we're trying to work that one out.
Right. Through you, Madam Chair, the public access for vehicle access at the moment has been for in the southern forest rather than the northern one. And clearly driving vehicles near the ferry turns is quite detrimental, and I'm assuming that we will prevent that. But has been a tradition for people to drive their vehicles onto the beach there, and we'll need to manage that under whatever policy framework we come up with. So it's up for debate, I guess, that's what I'm saying.
So, Madam Chair, just to be clear, it is an issue that we realise exists, particularly in the South Forest, and in terms of the process for the reserve management plan and the park management plan is actually raising that as an issue. Is it appropriate? Isn't it appropriate? So we can be clear about a policy for the future.
Okay, thank you. Right, good day, Councillor Flippiner, Councillor Cooper, then we'll put it.
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair,
Flippiner.
and my apologies for not raising it earlier at our pre-agenda, but I only saw it when I saw the slide, and it was under key issues, and I just want to reinforce what our matua was talking about around the naming rights. So my first question is, how much land did Te Uri o Hau and Ngāti Manuhiri gift to council, or gift total?
So the land in the north at Turiahau is just 219 hectares. And the precinct plan, so the vesting hasn't occurred yet,
No.
Councillor Filipaina, would envisage in the order of 180 hectares,
Okay.
subject to survey.
Yep, sorry.
Subject to survey and
Yeah,
all
yep,
those things.
yep.
And the residual land is, as Mr Olsen said, that is already owned by a council and managed, is in the order of 80 hectares, or 78. to be
Okay.
precise.
And then you spoke about the Auckland, the regional park management plan and around naming rights. Is there a specific policy in that around who can name the park?
Yes, there is a policy
asking.
that gives the council, gives people that have an interest in the land the right to put forward a name. The final decision, of course, rests with this council, but given the gifting of this land, and I think there would be a strong argument in favour of that naming coming from those mana whenua.
To mana whenua.
Yeah.
Chair.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to
Yep.
add to that, if you like. So there's the naming policy, but there's also other policies within the Regional Parks Management Plan that recognise the cultural footprint and mana whenua role. So you have to look at those things together, and so on balance there would be a strong approach to having not only the park naming, but as Neil also mentioned, place
Yep.
and to represent the history and tell the story.
So, Chair, just through you, I just want to ensure, and I again support what Matua has said around the naming rights, and I believe with the amount that the land and hectares that they're given, is that they should have the right to name the two properties, both our mana whenua, because I also know that there is a naming policy as well, that the local board has the right to get the names, but has the final decision. That's why I'm putting it on the table now, that I'm hoping at some stage, and I know when we spoke at a workshop, and I think it was a workshop in Matua, you also mentioned around the recognition and how we celebrate the recognition of the gifting of the land. So, Chair, I was going to move an amendment, but I won't, in regards to the naming of the parks or the area. So I just want to make sure that, that is it here, and that our policy around naming of places, I know it's streets, but I just want to make sure that it doesn't get mixed up with the local board and they have the final decision with the policy that we currently have. I know it's streets, but...
Kia ora, Madam Chair.
Yes, they do.
So you are the decision maker in this
Okay,
regard.
cool.
It's regional parkland, so it rests with this committee.
But road naming.
And we'll be
So-
reporting back to the committee in terms of
Cool, thanks.
the draft management plan that comes out of this process. And I expect we'll give you more clarity at that stage.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So we could work with mana whenua, with Te Uri o Hau, and work that through.
Ngāti Maruhiri,
Ngāti
thank you.
Marihiri, yeah. Okay, phew, good call, councillor Filipaina. Right, councillor Cooper.
Wrap it up quickly.
Yeah, thank you.
Just Madam Chair, I mean, as we see, it's not going to be till next August that the final decision's made, and I suppose my role in this will be regulatory committee will appoint the commissioners, independent commissioners, I guess, will it be? Or will it be local government?
No, that will be your role through the chair.
Okay.
And we will bring that to your committee at the time we are notifying the draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess, Madam Chair, when I look at it, a lot of the issues canvassed here today, concerns by councillors and the public, this is the really good opportunity to get in here and everybody, you know, be consulted and have their say. And I'm really pleased to see the cultural values assessment in there, which will support things like the naming. I just think we've got to get through this process, follow it, and make sure it's really robust. And I'm really pleased to see that kind of double consultation so that we get a very good community and stakeholder-driven draft, rather than just us doing it and then it going out. So we'll look forward to that and have a good outcome, not almost this time next year.
Yeah.
Bar a couple of months.
Okay,
Well, we'll just
thank you, councillor Cooper. That's a good wrap up, and in the meantime, with councillor Sayers and the local board's support, we can get some of those other issues dealt with and rolling. Okay. Okay, councillor Cooper did close the debate. I'll allow a very quick comment from the seconder.
I want to make an apology to Mace Ward. I think I called you Mr. Mace instead of Mr. Ward, so sorry about that, Mace. Yeah, my apologies.
In the light of
Answer
today,
to
that
everything.
really doesn't kind of figure as an insult, I tell you. So, no, that's fine, Greg. Right, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Thank you.
Awesome. Let's give this beautiful part of the world some love. And Aaron, thank you for your forbearance today. And I've had a text from Councillor Penny Webster who sends her love. So thank you all. Phew. Right now, I was a bit previous. It might be the right time for Glengarry Road now. Sorry, team, to have got you up here under false pretences. Right, so we've heard from Saffron. I'm going to take the report as read. Are there any questions? Councillor Cooper?
Just quickly, Madam Chair, I mean, I've read Ms Coney's objection and heard the local board too, but I've also read the responses, and so I just want to reiterate, just sort of ask again to kind of really thrash this out. So you're saying there's really, I mean, the area that is talked about isn't significantly under sort of served for parks in your report. You said in general there could be that in wider Glen Eden, but in this particular area that's not the case. Is that what you've said?
Well, through the chair, yes, that was the opinion. That was the advice we received.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Okay, I'd really like to hear, because I think this is the important, this is the nub of it. For me, is that the concern that it could be used for something else, it's an ideal spot, etc., but when I read the report it says not.
Through the chair, I can answer that. This specific area, there is no shortage of open space provision. So we have 200 metres away, Nicholas Reserve, and 450 metres away, Pars Park. So the broader local board area, there will be gaps in open space provision, but not in this specific location.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. It's really important to understand that. I'll let these guys capture it. There's also the land, that we bought, the very expensive piece of land that we bought in Oratia, which is not that far away as well, so it's a pretty well-serviced area. Councillor Casey.
Well, I was just interested in the process by which the board can't make an objection, but a member of the board can, but not on behalf of the board.
Yes, I think so the advice is that the board has had plenty of opportunities in the disposal process to provide their considerations on the proposal to sell, and being a reserve, that means reserve revocation as well, because that's required for sale. And the advice is that they cannot submit an objection to that statutory process. And that but they do have the opportunity under the standing orders, apparently, to be able to address the issue at the committee.
Which was today.
And that was discussed at length in the governance review.
That's what was just.
Yeah.
That's what was coming to mind, and
Yeah.
there's no change to that, though. There's
No.
no change to that.
Nope, and we voted on that at the governing body and we didn't change it, so this is the process. Member Wilcox.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Having just sat through a pretty contentious designation hearing, one of the things that was brought up was the story of cross-pollination. And I suppose the Finance and Performance Committee, of which I'm not a member, agreed for this property to be sold. I suppose my concern is that the orchard next door doesn't then turn around and subdivide, and then we're purchasing back a property for a park or something.
Well, I would the process, if the reserve revocation is requested from the minister and is approved and the status is uplifted, then our next step would be to do a plan change, because it's currently open space zoning. So the process is to plan change to the most appropriate use, which is probably, the second guessing would be single house. And then that would just be a regulatory, if the land was acquired by the adjoining owner or by another party, then how it's developed would be subject to the regulatory controls under the unitary plan.
And through the chair, the purchase of additional land for park would be guided by the open space provision policy, which is the policy that dictates that there's no gap in open space provision.
Okay. Councillor Walker.
I really just want to advocate on behalf of the local board, Madam Chair, and I'm assuming I can speak to that.
You can speak to the
In which
recommendation.
case I will.
Yeah.
So we have a situation where the local board, and that's the local board in total, I understand, would like to see this piece of land retained for reserve. I don't know how much we're going to get for it, but given its long, skinny nature, it may not be a great deal. Having said that, that very nature does lend itself to access from a significant number of properties around it, and the possible linkage with a road behind. I take the point that the local board makes around greenways and linkages, the significant intensification that is occurring in the immediate vicinity that we know about. So I really think myself, and I certainly agree with the local board, that hocking these areas off for a short-term gain is counterproductive. And we know that when we do hock these areas off, the land that we acquire, we pay top dollar for. Top dollar. So we're just spiting ourselves on an ongoing basis here and prejudicing future generations because they're not going to have so much reserve land. So I'll certainly be voting against this in accord with the local board.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. My question or comment goes to one of the observations made by the local board as well, and it's been alluded to by some of the previous speakers in terms of the increased housing and intensification that's going to take place around Glen Eden, and in particular the comment by the local board that there's no plans for additional open space. I guess my question therefore is that correct? That there is, despite intensification that might be enabled there, that there's no plans for acquiring additional local space in this general area?
Through the chair, I would have to say at current there aren't any plans to acquire it, but as development occurs, then we would look at through applying the open space provision policy whether additional open space was required. Yeah. So that would be in the broader local board area, not in this specific vicinity.
Yeah. I guess just to follow that up, Madam Chair, and it goes to a kind of recurring issue in terms of local boards, in some instances anyway, disagreeing with the disposal of a parcel of land. Not always, so we get, I don't know what the record of Waitakere Ranges local board is. I don't know if there's too many properties come up. I don't know if there's other local boards who will let one piece of land go quite happily, and then they will put up a case for retention of another piece of land. And in increasing instances, whether they show themselves to be willing in one occasion and then no, it doesn't make any difference, because the general feeling is, oh well, you've got to get rid of it, you've got to hock it off, we've got Panuku's got their targets and all that sort of thing. So it's one of those fundamental conflicts of really who knows best here. Is it the local board, it's their local patch? They're putting up a reasonably detailed defence for retaining this land, or is it the governing body sitting in here thinking, oh geez, we better get rid of this because we need the money at some future point. So I'm in these instances I'm uneasy, and I'm particularly uneasy when local boards show themselves to be reasonably even-handed over a period of time, because they are then obviously making a case-by-case analysis of each particular piece of land. I'm uncertain really whether this should be supported or not, and I think if the local boards are willing to make a reasonably detailed submission and justify it, then it's very difficult to go against them in those circumstances.
Can we just
Why was it late?
clarify? I think there is a little bit of confusion here. That this is not in Glen Eden. This is nowhere near Glen Eden. As the old councillor for that area, I know this area like the back of my hand. I know exactly where this park is. It's walking distance to Pars Park. It's walking distance to the very expensive piece of land that we bought in Oratia for open space. It's a decent bike ride or bus ride to Glen Eden. So this is not going to be utilised by the high-density 10-storey buildings in Glen Eden. We need to do some stuff in the middle of Glen Eden. That's what this is about. This piece of park is not. This is not a Glen Eden piece of park. This is, the way our community works. This is an Oratia piece of park, really. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Look, I wasn't going to move this because I'm actually a bit scared of our local board, so I'm not going to be a populist, so I will move this. Someone will second it.
I think it's
Oh,
already
you did?
moved.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
good. Okay, good. But what I'm
Wilcox moved it.
concerned about, I think we're using the tower blocks as a red herring, because that has one of the largest urban parks in Auckland in it. It has Waikamete Cemetery. It's got passive recreation galore in there. It is really highly used, right next door. And when I look at this, I've heard what the local board has said, but I've also seen the responding report from the staff around that. And I think we've had a whole morning of people saying stuff, but no opportunity to put the other side. And I think this is one of the issues here, is this is nowhere near Glen Eden. It's not within walking distance of Glen Eden at all, where the intensity is going to go. I also look at it where I know the local board have been really concerned about operational costs as well.
We need to vote. 'cause
And
I need
we'll
to-
have this piece of land, which we've already decided to sell. It's already been decided to dispose of it. This is just the revocation process. So we'd have to rescind the sale as well, or we just leave it there, mowing it ad infinitum, but having no money to develop it, and it doesn't meet the policy, so we wouldn't be putting any playground on there. There's no plans to make a walkway through there, nothing. We've no inkling of what Nola's ever might do. And even if Nola's did develop, it's still within 200 metres for one park, 400 metres for another. And that's pretty close. So for me, I think we've just got to follow our policy as much as we can. If this was a nice square bit of land that, you know, was actually met our criteria, I'd be right into it, absolutely to support it. But what I've seen over this whole process is often we get little funny bits of land and the local boards are going, well, keep it, keep it. But what that ends up happening is you just have to go to McLaren Park to look at those funny little ad hoc bits of land that were in the old policies that we had, which were reserve development. And the owners, the developers couldn't build on it, so they got a crappy little piece of land that was too skinny, in the wrong place, boggy, all of those sorts of things, which we still can't use. And I just don't like to see us, by default, carrying that on. But anyway, the council house needs to put this.
I do need to put this,
Yeah,
because I
sorry.
just have got to do something
Sorry.
right now. No, I
But
totally
yeah,
agree.
so that's
and
why
I just
do
want to vote
support
on
it.
it.
If it was a really useful piece, we'd do it, but it's
Yep.
not.
Okay, so I want to put this to the
It's
vote,
slapped
so I can
down
be
silly
here to
by my local
vote.
board, but
I'm going to put the recommendation.
By
or-
division?
Oh, no, why don't we just record our votes, councillor?
Okay, that's fine
So,
then.
yeah, okay. All those in favour, please say aye.
I,
Against?
No.
So, won't those ones, right, thank you. I'm just going to take 2 minutes and I'm going to hand over to councillor Philip Hyder.
Against?
I'll let you carry that.
Put it against?
Sorry, I just have to quickly. Casey, Walker.
Anybody else?
Sayers.
Okay, item 16, this should be quick. So, all yours, my friend.
I will be very quick. We are seeking approval to start a consultation process under the Reserves Act. The proposed land exchange has considerable merit and it is supported by the local board.
Okay, I'll move it. Second. Yeah, councillor Hills. If there's no questions, comments, I'm going to put it.
I just had one quick question, Mr
All
Chair,
yours, councillor Walker.
and that is the exchange of 375 square metres for 132 square metres. Rationale behind that in terms of value?
It's from an open space perspective, we gain 243 square metres. It provides better access and accessibility into the reserve. And the developer can't build on it, so it's perfect outcomes for open space.
Cool. Okay then, no further. I'm going to put all those in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. Item 17, process 1. I'm going to move it.
I'll second it.
Yep, Desley. Sorry, councillor Simpson, saw your lovely smile, so second. If there's no questions or comments, I'm going to put it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. I'm now going to move 1, and I don't know, just to confirm our time. Yeah, but I'm just going to have a look at 4:30, so we can,
We're gonna go
4:25,
into
we've got 5 more
confidential
minutes for
first?
the extension. So I'm going to move into
I'll
confidential.
second.
Second by councillor Cooper. I will put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. So we just going to wait for the